Hey guys, so I wanted to speak to you today about some of the most common complaints by atheists and agnostics about the character of God. In 1 Peter 3:15, it says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you the reason for the hope that is within you, with meekness and fear." So we as Christians should always be ready to defend our God and have an answer for those who have questions. And listen, not all questions are malicious. Some are out of pure lack of facts. Let me just say, this is a foundation for learning anything. Read the sources in their entirety. If you want to know about the character of God, you can't seek this answer out without reading the Bible. In the Bible, you may not understand everything that you read, so you may seek out opinions of others on how to interpret what you're reading, but I definitely want to challenge you to do so fairly. If you know the person that you're listening to has a history of expressing disdain for God, you're going to get a biased answer. If you do listen to that person, at least also listen to the person who is speaking in defense of God so that you can draw your own conclusion fairly and without bias. This is not something to lazily consider. Your entire eternity could be resting on how diligently you seek out this answer, so I advise you to do so honestly and with fervor. And I promise you that if you do that, you will find a God that is loving, good, true, and worthy of your loyalty and praise to him. The Bible promises in Jeremiah 29:13, "And you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." So if you're going to seek out an answer, seek it out honestly and wholeheartedly. If you have your mind made up before you even begin, you're wasting your time. If you're only searching for opinions that agree with your conclusions you've already decided on, then you aren't really searching for the truth. What you're really in search of is justification to cut God out of your life, which is not at all wise if you're wrong. You need to consider the fact that you may be wrong and open for other views. So the first objection to God that I've heard multiple times is the question of killing instructed by God to the Israelites in the Old Testament, sometimes to entire nations. And I want to stop here and make a point before I continue with this. The point is that if you take a partial story, I can make anyone sound like whatever I want them to sound like. Someone can say they hate the beach because there's so many people there and it's uncomfortable, and they can go on to say they love when it's peaceful and quiet outside. I can completely distort that message the person's trying to convey by picking and choosing the parts I like and don't like based on my own agenda. I can say, oh, he loves the beach. He says he likes when it's peaceful and quiet outside. Do you see the problem there? I've completely distorted the information with half information. I find this topic of the Israelites being told to utterly destroy entire nations to be a prime example of this. Usually this tidbit of information is presented by atheists and agnostics without the reason why God instructed the Israelites to do so. So we're going to look at when he instructed them to do so. In Deuteronomy 20:16-18, he says, "But of the cities of these peoples which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, you shall let nothing that breathes remain alive, but you shall utterly destroy them. The Hittite and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite, just as the Lord your God has commanded you, lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations which they have done for their gods, and you sin against the Lord your God." So upon being presented with this information at first, you might be like, wait, I thought God was a loving God. How can he ultimately sentence all these people to death? And some might stop there and make a complete case against God without ever seeking out an answer of why he sentenced all of these people to death. First, I want to remind that person that God is the creator of all life, and he has more of a right than any judge in any courtroom to execute judgment as he sees fit. The next thing I'd like to do is educate you on what you missed in that story. Did you catch the part where the reason God wanted everyone executed was because the abominations they were committing? We have examples of these abominations in scripture. In Leviticus 18:21, "And you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire of Molech, nor shall you profane the name of the Lord your God. I am the Lord." Psalm 106:37-38, "They even sacrificed their sons and daughters to demons and shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters whom they sacrificed to idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood." These are just two examples, but there's easily a dozen explaining what was going on during this time. The people of those regions would heat up the hands of an idol until it was burning hot. They would then take their own babies that they gave birth to and they would kill the babies in an act of sacrifice to these man-made idols. They believed in doing so, this false god would bless their crops for the year to come. This was ingrained in the culture of these people during this time. Imagine if this was going on today. Surely, if there was a section in society doing this, every one of them would be arrested and more than likely given the death penalty in the court of law. Doing so would actually save billions of lives in the long run from suffering the same fate of being sacrificed to what the Bible identified as demons. Do you see how half a story is not only dangerous but detrimental to understanding? This practice of mass murder was offensive to a loving God, and it's within his right to execute judgment to put a stop to it. The argument that God is genocidal due to that judgment shows a lack of understanding and knowledge. Of course, God isn't just going to randomly hate a race that he himself created and want to destroy them without reason. That logic makes no sense. The Bible explains that their wicked actions made this judgment necessary. He didn't want billions more to die at the hands of the people, and he didn't want the Israelites to pick up on these evil practices. Don't think that the Israelites were spared from judgment of this. God instructed that if any of the Israelites picked up these evil practices, they were not to live either. In Leviticus 22, again you shall say to the children of Israel, whoever of the children of Israel, or the strangers who dwell in Israel, who gives any of his descendants to Molech, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. So again, we have to know the full story and the reasons behind things before we can question the character of God. God executed judgment on the wicked acts of these people, and furthermore, he didn't want the Israelites to pick up on these wicked practices. If you read the Bible, you'll find that the Israelites in fact did not destroy all the people that they were instructed to, and it actually validates God's judgment because they started doing the same things. They picked up on the wicked practices, sacrificing their own children to these demons. And again, God's judgment was just. Putting to death those that practiced these murderous acts saved many lives in the long run. So the next grievance that is often expressed against God is the question of why he allows bad things to happen to good people. Ravi Zacharias told an old Chinese proverb once that I think beautifully answers this with its reasoning. The proverb goes like this. Sai Wang lived on the border and raised horses for a living. One day he lost one of his prized horses. After hearing of the misfortune, his neighbor felt sorry for him and came to comfort him. But Sai Wang simply asked, "How could we know it's not a good thing for me?" After a while, the lost horse returned, and with another beautiful horse. The neighbor came over again and congratulated Sai Wang on his good fortune. But Sai Wang simply asked, "How could we know it's not a bad thing for me?" One day, his son went out for a ride with the new horse. He was violently thrown from the horse and broke his leg. The neighbors once again expressed their condolences to Sai Wang, but Sai Wang simply said, "How could we know it's not a good thing for me?" 1 year later, the emperor's army arrived at the village to recruit all able-bodied men to fight in the war. Because of his injuries, Sai Wang's son could not go off to war and was spared from certain death. To me, this proverb perfectly sums up life. We have such a limited amount of information on just about everything. We have no idea what the future holds, but the Bible tells us that God knows every single day that will ever happen to us before we're ever even born. In Psalm 103:16, your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. We also know that God is always there for those of us that love and follow him. In Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So just as the Chinese proverb was trying to relay, we do not have enough information to say if something bad that happens to us isn't actually something good for later. It could be, as in the case of the proverb, it appears bad now, but it could be life-saving down the road. It could be that an event builds character in us that makes us a better person. It could be that our testimony can be light to others who are experiencing the same thing. The fact of the matter is that when we truly trust in God, we no longer have to stress ourselves out with worries of this nature. We can approach every obstacle as a chance for growth. In James 1:2-4, it says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." So these trials that we face are actually making us better in some way. Our limited knowledge and understanding may not see this at the time, but God, again, knows every day of our lives before they're even lived. He sets things up in place for us to get us through things and times, maybe days, maybe even years before they even happen. I remember my senior year in high school, I wanted to take a road trip with a friend for the first time, driving several states away by myself. I lived in Virginia and wanted to drive all the way down to Florida with a friend of mine so we can see if we liked this college campus we were considering attending the following year. We had very limited money being high school kids, but enough to make it down and back with very few deviations from our plan. I drove all the way to South Carolina and was so exhausted. So the girl I rode with and I had just switched so she could take over driving. So she got on the highway, and I promise all of this seemed like it happened in slow motion. Traffic was almost at a complete standstill about 100 yards up, but for some reason, my friend did not respond to this by adjusting her speed to slow down until it was too late. She started frantically jerking the wheel back and forth and slammed on the brakes all of a sudden, and I found myself facing north on southbound 95 and still sliding. We managed to walk away that day with no injuries to either us and no damage to the car. How, you ask? Someone nice enough to pull over filled us in. It had been raining for like a week before our trip, making a very large area of very high mud that was able to stick to the car like glue and stop it from colliding into a bunch of trees that were at the bottom of the steep ditch that we found ourselves in. When we got out of the car, mud was about halfway up the door on both sides. Someone with AAA pulled over and called and got our car towed for free. Someone else pulled over and was on their way to casinos and gave us over $100. I can't even remember the exact amount. I know it was over $100, close to $200, to help us with our situation. And when the tow truck guy came, his cousin owned a car wash. Then the guy washed our car for free. You can't make this stuff up. Even if I did believe in coincidences and luck, that's far too many lucky breaks for one day. Someone greater was on my side that day, and I'm still grateful to God for the way He delivered me out of that one. Not only did I walk away with no injury to my friend, myself, or my dad's car, but I actually turned a profit. Since the entire ordeal didn't cost me, I now had extra money to spend on my trip. Why God allows evil is the next big topic that people always use when they're questioning God. They question why a loving God would not step in and stop the evil going on around the world. I find this question interesting for the fact that some of the evil being done in the world could be done at the very hand of the person asking that question. It may not be an extreme case of evil, but for example, if you're guilty of slandering someone, that's not acting in love. This person wants to question God without first taking a look at themselves. Wrong is wrong. Though murder and slander have completely different impacts on a person, they're both acts that show the opposite of love, which is against the will of God and which is sin. Evil is a reflection on man and not of God. God gave man free will, and according to the Bible, set before man the choice to do right and wrong. The choice that man chooses is a reflection on that man and not on God. In Deuteronomy 30:15-19, we find, "See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil, and that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in His ways and to keep His commandments, His statutes, and His judgments, that you may live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away so that you do not hear and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land which you cross over the Jordan to go in and possess. I call heaven and earth as a witness today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live." So God made man with the ability to choose between good and evil, and that choice will affect our destiny and eventually our eternity. Listen, God could have made man as robots without free will, but God wants man to have the ability to think and choose for themselves, and He wants a relationship with man. When men selfishly go after the desires of their own heart without putting anyone else into consideration, we see the birth of every evil of the world. Evil is the absence of love for God and for your fellow man. all evil, from murder and rape and stealing down to adultery and slander, is born from the absence of love, and God is love. So another question that people ask is why women are so oppressed in the Bible. And I love this one because I know when a person voices this concern, they haven't read the Bible, and I jump at the opportunity to educate someone on this topic. So before Israel had kings, they were governed by judges that basically would rule over them by direction from God. Google the story of Deborah when you get a chance. She was a judge in the time of the Old Testament, which was basically the highest position one can have at the time. She even led men into battle. The Bible also gives several stories of women who function as leaders in their own way. Esther was exalted as queen in that time. That the Jews went into captivity, and was a heroine that she saved the Jews from annihilation. All throughout the Old and New Testament, there were mentions of men and women prophets to God. Now, prophets are the people who speak directly to God and lead people based on the word of the Lord that is given to them. It's clear that people that make these grievances about women in the Bible don't really read the Bible and what it says about men and women. The Bible says God created male and female in the image of God. The Crusades are another event that people like to bring up when they're questioning why they should believe in God and questioning the character of God, which I find interesting. A little known fact about the Crusades is that they were launched as an answer to the conversion by the sword that was spreading by followers of Muhammad to Islam. Spain actually was at one point captured by Islam, and the rest of Europe would have been too if it were not for the Crusades. Were there atrocities done by the Crusaders? Yes, and this shouldn't be overlooked, but I want to make an important note here. You can only judge a religion based on what it teaches, not by what people do that claim to be followers. This goes hand in hand with the question, how do you justify all the killing done in the name of religion? My answer to that is, how do you justify all the deaths not done in the name of religion? The 20th century is the bloodiest century in recorded human history, and most of the killings were done in the name of Marxist atheism. It's estimated that under Mao Zedong, anywhere from 40 to 70 million were killed. Under the Khmer Rouge, an estimated 1.7 million were killed. Under Stalin, numbers ranging from 30 to 60 million killed. With that being said, killing isn't a religion issue, it's a man issue. A religion has to be judged based on the instructions that it gives for violence and not on what people are doing in the name of that religion. For example, about the spreading of the religion of Christianity, the Bible gives clear guidance. It says in Matthew 10:14, "And whoever will not receive your words, when you depart from that city, shake the dust off your feet." That's it. If you accept Christianity, great. If not, bye. Leave. It also says that if anyone strikes you on the cheek, you're to turn the other cheek and give that to them also. And that's Matthew 5:39. Those were instructions given to Christians about spreading the message of their religion and about violence. There's no guidance in Christianity to convert anyone by the sword or even to take over the government. And to the contrary, the Bible instructs followers in Romans 13:1-2, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves." So the last objection to God I want to look at today is the death of a loved one. And it's one of the most difficult and actually fairly common things I've heard in cases that people have against God. If God is so loving, they argue, why would he allow my loved one to die? This is kind of difficult because we love our family members. And in our love for them, we lose an honest, objective perspective on the truth of the matter, which is this: everyone that you know or will ever meet in this life is going to die one day, and that's you and I included. In Hebrews 9:27, it says, "And it is appointed for men to die once, but after this, the judgment." We all owe a death, like it or not, that we all are going to have to go through one day, and guess what? It's never going to be a good time to lose those that we love. If we die when we're young, our loved ones will say, but they had their entire lives in front of them. If we die before having kids, then our loved ones will say, but they never had kids to continue their legacy. If we die after having kids, our family will say, but their kids never got to know their parents. If we die after having kids and then them having kids, now their kids don't have grandparents, and then we'll remember all the good times that we had with our grandparents. You see where I'm going? There's never going to be a time when you're ready to let go of someone you love, but we all have to die one day, and it's never going to be a convenient time. The good news is that for the believer, we know that death is only the beginning of our eternity. We have hope and joy in the belief that we will see those that we love again one day. Our only concern should be getting into a relationship with God and leading those that we love around us to do the same, so that we can have that reunion with those that we love. And I hope this video answered some of the questions that you guys might have, or some of the questions that might come up when you're trying to witness to someone about Christ. And I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.